Today is June 17th, 2012, and I'm in LaVora Perry with my son, Jarod Richardson, interviewing Belinda for Case Western Reserve's Social Justice Institute's Voicing in Action project. So, Belinda, tell us about yourself and the history of your family.
Okay, let's see. Belinda Kyle. I moved to East Cleveland in 1967. I have, it was my mom and my dad and my siblings. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister, so there were 5 of us. It was a great time for us. My dad had purchased his first home, so his home purchase was here in East Cleveland, Ohio. I attended Chambers Elementary School, Kirk Junior High School, and I'm a proud Shaw High alumni, 1977. And now I'm back here with my own children, living in East Cleveland.
So you live in the same house that your family moved in 1967, correct?
Right. Our family house is a 2-sided dwelling. I grew up on the other side, but now I live next door to my mom.
And I should say too, this is, as you mentioned, the first Father's Day since your father transitioned.
Correct. So my dad passed away in March, and this is our first Father's Day where he's not physically present, but my dad will always be present in our lives.
And what are your parents' names?
My dad was Ronald Lee Eddings, and my mother is Dawn Louise Waller Eddings.
And can you think back to your earliest memories of East Cleveland and just give a little bit more detail about what life was like for you back then and in the city itself?
Well, East Cleveland, I can always say, even during its time of struggle, which we're in right now, East Cleveland has always been a community. So I say that because we've always, in a sense, had a relationship with the person who lived next door to us in some way or another. They were our neighbors. We know them by name. We've seen that less and less over the past few decades, but it's starting to come back now, which is really cool because Randy, my daughter, knows the kid next door. He comes and he plays in our yard, and we know his mother and we speak to her. I think the real richness of East Cleveland is that we were a community of neighbors, but the other richness was what it offered to the kids who grew up in this community. We have a very rich park system, not just our Forest Hill Park, but we have pocket parks situated throughout the neighborhoods. Chambers Elementary School, where I grew up, had a phenomenal park. Some of the greatest basketball players in Ohio came from playing in that very park. There was always, we had a swimming pool. We don't have that now, but we had a swimming pool growing up in East Cleveland. There was Little League Baseball was a very strong part of the community. The community came out to watch the kids of the community play baseball. Shaw High football games was a real part of our community. You went to the football games on Friday because kids you knew played in the game. So I think the real value of this community is the fact that it is a place of neighbors who cared about the people inside of the community. I believe over maybe the past 20 years, we saw that decline just because of various reasons, but I think we're starting to see that come back, and that's what makes this place special. My daughter was just saying to me the other day, there's some kids that we have going to summer camp at Case Western Reserve, the NYSP program, and what was really special to me was that a couple of the mothers I was helping to get their kids in to the camp, their kids are in camp with my kids. I went to elementary school with them. So here we are, we continue that generation. My kids know their kids. That's what community to me is all about, that we live in a place, we share space, and we know each other in sharing that space so that we respect each other and, try to help one another inside the space we call East Cleveland.
mentioned there's some basketball players. Do you know any of the names of those basketball
Sure,
players?
Clark Kellogg grew up in East Cleveland, Ohio, on East 141st Street, attended Chambers Elementary School, played basketball on that very basketball court that used to sit, and used to sit because decisions we've taken those things out of the community. Either they were eliminated over time because of wear and tear, and no one ever replaced them, or we've physically made a decision to remove something and not replace it. Like the swimming pool in our high school was not replaced. But getting back to Clark Kellogg, and then he was such a phenomenal basketball player, having grown up on the concrete courts here in East Cleveland, Ohio, had the opportunity to attend St. Joseph High School, standout athlete at The Ohio State University, now has a high-level position within the organization of the Indiana Pacers basketball team, and does commentary on ESPN. This kid was from East Cleveland, Ohio. We used to produce those type of people, and we still can. I'm sure we still do produce some really quality people that have gone on to do great things, and maybe I'm not in touch with them, haven't known them personally. But in the legacy of living in this community, I can look back and say I know people who were from this community. John Hinton attended schools in East Cleveland. John Hinton was a star. That was, what's his character name? John Hinton was on the show with Queen Latifah. Jarod, please don't record this because I'm trying to figure it out. What was Overton?
Oh, really? Oh, that's right.
Overton.
Okay.
Superior Elementary School.
Living Color.
Living Color, right. No, not Living Color. Queen Latifah.
Right.
And they lived together in the apartment. Living Single.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Living Single. John Hinton from East Cleveland. We have, you mentioned Jackie Gillen today. Mm-hmm. Jackie Gillen grew up in East Cleveland, out there doing phenomenal work, right. On a community level. Neighborhood leadership, wow, what a phenomenal program that really helps to develop leaders for our community. Right. Jackie Gillen is a product of East Cleveland, Ohio. Right. And, people always laugh at us Shaw High alumni because we are proud to say we're Shaw High alumni, right. But because that's the community we grew up in, that's the network. I get teary-eyed when we have our weekends and we have thousands of people return to East Cleveland. I think it's a special place.
Great. In what ways, did I ask you, what are your fondest memories of East Cleveland?
Fondest memories of East Cleveland, I guess, would be learning about freedom and independence. Having Windermere Rapid Station there meant I could travel anywhere from East Cleveland. I think I was telling you before we got started, my mother, when I was growing up as a teenager, once we finished our home chores, she encouraged us, go get on the bus and explore the world outside of the borders of East Cleveland. So I think for me, the fondest memories, my friends and I, we used to get on the train, go downtown. There was a nut house down there where you got warm Morals Nut House. You got warm pistachios, and there was just, you grew up with a real sense of freedom and exploration. You could be curious about the world because living here, you could get out and come back, right? Even now, I travel often, and it's cool. I just get on the rapid transit, and the next time I get off on soil somewhere, it's in another place, another state or another town. Right. That's cool about East Cleveland.
Right. In what ways has the city changed over time? And what do you think contributed to those changes?
I think the biggest change for our community has been that we no longer as a collective share the same values. When I was growing up, family was key, right? We were a working class community. Dads went to work. Moms kind of were here taking care of the kids because the family was, key. Um, and so many of us shared that family value. So I think where we are as a collective in the top 5 or top 10 of our values, that for many of us, we shared the top 3 in the same order. And I think that's what kind of gives you a stronger sense of community. When
What were those top 3?
I would say the top 3 values were probably family, of course God was first, family, and then the third value that I would say we all share, it was a real work ethic. Because we were a working class community, you knew you had to work. So that was a value that we shared as a community. I know in the group of friends I grew up in, my dad worked for General Motors. My friend's dad worked for Pepsi Company. I had other friends' dad who maybe worked at LTV still. It was a working class mindset. So we all grew up knowing we were going to have jobs one day. So I think when we shared those values, having that collective, those that we shared in kind of the same order, the same important values, I think that's what really has changed. That as we've grown as a community, or the complexion of the community has changed, the composition of the values have changed. Sure, everybody may value the same thing, but not in the same order. So that kind of creates a chaos in a sense, because even though you may value family and I may value family, if I value family first and you value family fifth, there's that conflict when we all are out there together. So I was just thinking about that. It's interesting you asked me the question, because I realized that was one of the biggest changes in our community, that education, for example, coming out of that working class mindset, knowing we were going to have a job someday, we knew we needed an education, right? So that collective of values, God, family, education, work, in the same order, gives you a cooler community. I think gives you a community where everybody's kind of vibing on, in the same way.
So what do you think contributed to the change in the community, the changes?
Oh, I wish I had the answer to that. I'm sure. I think America overall, the fabric of our larger society changed. And so that forced, a change in values. Perhaps, and I'm sure I'm not able to articulate it, but perhaps, when the larger when the larger society imposes itself on you, for example, when the larger society makes the decision to ship jobs overseas, and then unemployment becomes more and more pervasive in that space you share, then of course everybody's values change, because your value becomes survival. And then in that, then you have chaos, I believe.
Okay. How has race or racism impacted you personally, and if so, how?
I grew up in East Cleveland. We came here in 1967. Many of our teachers were white Americans. Our principal, Mr. Whalen, was a white American who loved us, who wanted us educated, who worked hard for us. So I always say, I've had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Whalen. I said to him, you didn't prepare me, because I didn't know they didn't like us, right? Because we grew up in East Cleveland. We didn't know that we were, sub-citizens of this greater. They wanted us educated. They provided the best opportunities for us. And we were Black Americans, and it was the white Americans who were at the helm of the decision making. But then when I left East Cleveland, I learned quickly that there was racism, there is racism, and it does impact my life. I was impacted by racism and gender, that the effects of people not believing in me because I was a woman. I had to experience that, but predominantly in the workplace I experienced it. My opportunities were limited because I was a black female, even though I was capable. Also limited because of education. At one point I didn't have a college degree. That didn't make me less capable, it just meant I didn't have a college degree. But I was limited by that. And so
when you say you first encountered racism outside of East Cleveland, where did that take place, and how, and what were
probably
some
the
issues?
University of Iowa.
Okay.
When I enrolled in college at the University of Iowa and had an opportunity to go to the counselor, because I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but had the opportunity to attend the University of Iowa, and the answer from this male guidance counselor or college counselor was home economics. I knew good and darn well I didn't want to major in home ec. I knew I had not left East Cleveland, Ohio, after growing up in a household with 5 siblings, 4 siblings, and my mother had taught me to cook, clean, and bake, all that. I had learned I didn't want to major in it. But I mean, that was his answer for me, for the person who looked like me. That was his answer, home economics.
Preparing you to be a
homemaker. Yeah, that's what black women become, according to him. Of course, that, and as a matter of fact, as I look back on it, it's probably one of the reasons I dropped out of school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and they couldn't help me decide. So it was like, well, I'll just get a job.
Okay. And then, do you believe that racism has impacted the city of East Cleveland, and if so, how?
Sure. I believe it. I haven't quite figured out how to articulate it yet. I know, and I'm just learning a lot more about East Cleveland and structure. It's a little different now that I have the opportunity to work for the government of this community, to have a broader understanding of how all these things work together. Yeah, I'm sure racism has impacted us. It impacts the community in that it impacts each individual in the community. So then we're impacted collectively as a community, because each person individually goes out and has some experience with racism, and then they bring it back to where we live. I'm not quite able to describe on a broader sense how we're impacted as a whole community. I wouldn't want to say at this point that all the decisions that are made from a governmental standpoint are necessarily made on the issue of race. I'm learning a little bit more about economies and all that type of thing, but I'm sure we're impacted as a community because each individual household is impacted by racism.
Okay. And you touched on your role in the city, which I didn't really explain in the beginning, but can you just give your job title?
I'm the executive assistant to Mayor Norton, which I'm very proud of that, because I grew up in this community and now I get to actually work with and work beside other people who grew up in this community, who go to work every day, not for the paycheck every 2 weeks, but go to work every day because we love this place, and that's special to me.
And then, this is kind of similar to the other question, but different as well. Do you believe inequality has impacted you personally? And also, how has inequality impacted the city of East Cleveland, if indeed it has?
I'm still trying to figure out how I would answer that. I know it does, but to really be able to share that. But inequality, I think, when I really think about inequality for me, I think how we don't always get the information we need to make good decisions creates a real sense of inequality. If for example, in education, and in my household, I have a kid who goes to private school and a kid who goes to public school, so I get to see inequality in education every day. In private school, they assume that your child has all the resources necessary when they give an assignment. They assume there's a computer in the home with internet access. They assume a lot of things, but that I'll stick to that small one because that's an easy example. But in our public school, they don't assume that. So here's education in the public school dispensed with the assumption that you have every resource available to you.
You mean in the private school?
In the private school, I'm sorry. So that you have every resource available to you. You definitely have a computer with internet access and a printer and Microsoft Word or Publisher. So right, there's that general assumption. So that your assignments will look like, versus in a public school, we don't make that assumption for our kids, and a lot of our kids maybe don't. I don't know. I don't know the numbers on it. I don't want to assume that I do. But when my public school kid comes home, she does not have that demand on her. Now, eventually, that public school kid is going to show up at the same job interview, or let's even step back, they're going to apply to go to college. Now, when that private school kid, or even a kid who goes to a rich public school, and I don't mean rich in dollars, I mean rich in resources, rich in teachers who are inspired to teach. When they meet, there's going to be inequality. Not because my public school daughter is any less capable, it's just where she lives. So sure, yeah, we're impacted by inequality. I don't know what we're going to do about it, but we're impacted by it.
Right. And how do you think inequality, if you think that inequality has impacted the city of East Cleveland, how so?
I think we're impacted from a human capital perspective. I think that sometimes we don't have the best people in the best place or in the right place for us. So that creates inequality in the community because our leadership, people who guide the overall direction of infrastructure and those type of things, inequality in human capital, inequality in them understanding how to make this the best community. So yeah, inequality is all around.
Can you remember a time when the community fought for something? And if so, what happened?
I mean, recently, let's see, what do I know the community to have fought for? Wow. That's an answer. I don't know. I don't know if we have fought for something as a community. I'm trying to think. No, I don't. We need to be fighting for things. I'm sure we have. It's just maybe done. I don't know at this point.
How have surrounding institutions and cities impacted East Cleveland?
Well, we're surrounded by Cleveland Heights, Cleveland. I'll say University Circle as if it's its own city now because in a sense it is, and University Circle. And I think they all impact us. I moved here in 1967 when Martin Luther King was shot, and then there were subsequently following that, the Glenville riots. I was impacted, and I always remember this, how the National Guard came and sat up at the bridge right there by my house. But the posture they took was, you guys can let that burn, but don't cross this barrier here. And it relates back to the question where you asked me about racism impacting my life and how I didn't realize it until I left the borders of East Cleveland. Because even that, in a sense, was demonstrative of this was a community of value. So if you grow up in a community that's valued, you feel valued inside of it, right? And because of that, remember now, like I said, and the National Guard, I remember playing cards with them. I mean, that's how close my house was. So the Jeeps and everything were right over here. And their posture was not inside of East Cleveland controlling or limiting anything that was going on here. Their posture was to keep what was going on in Glenville and that Cleveland area there out of here. So, yeah.
Now, at that time, East Cleveland was still predominantly white, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas Glenville
was predominantly black.
Okay.
And so, predominantly in that, yeah. But I mean, on this street during that time, my neighbor next door was African American. The neighbor across the street was African American. So even though predominantly white, probably overall in the larger numbers, this section here was not predominantly white. We had begun to change into a black community. So I couldn't see it. I wasn't seeing it as they're protecting the white folk. I saw it as, hey, where I live and people around me look like me, this place is of value.
And then also, just so people like Jarod who listen in the future can understand, the riot was actually taking place in Glenville.
In the Glenville area.
Right.
And I'm next door, in a sense, although not right next door, I'm less than a quarter mile away. Right. And the fear, I'm sure, was it getting out of control. So they were able to place some limits on how much violence would take place. There was none going to come inside the borders of East Cleveland at that point.
And this was a riot in response to Martin Luther King's assassination?
I believe that was, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know.
In 68.
Yeah.
So this preceded his assassination.
And it could have been in 68. I moved here in 67, and maybe by me throwing that date out, it gets a little confusing. It was following the assassination of Martin Luther King. Yeah.
Okay. How have surrounding institutions, that's actually already.
Oh, so I was using that example of the institution of government, but getting to something closer, and we'll use CASE. CASE has always been a part of our academic life around East Cleveland. There was always programs. I remember Upward Bound. I participated in Upward Bound when I attended Shaw High School. Got the opportunity to go to Case Western Reserve. When I attended schools in East Cleveland, we always took field trips to the neighboring community, University Circle, Art Museum, Health Museum was at the time near there. So the institution was a part. Attended the symphony. You know, in 4th grade, you went to the symphony in East Cleveland. That's what you did. For me, it was a part of my life. I'm sure that kids today may not have that same feeling about it. And that's part of that erosion. That, to me, is a part of when I talk about leadership and that human capital before understood that University Circle was an important neighbor. And it was of value to cross the border and take your kids there. Now, our educational system understood that all the families, because we were a working community, you know, people went to work. Parents couldn't take off from work to take their kids to all those things. So the school did that for that working family. And there was nothing wrong with it. Didn't mean that my mom didn't give a darn about me. Didn't mean my dad didn't care about my education. The system understood working families were at work. So the school took us on those field trips. And so we had the relationship there with those institutions.
Now, what is your vision for East Cleveland's future?
As we become a more global society, I understand that my vision has to be for the youth, for the young people of this community. Because, I just had a conversation with our mayor, and I was saying to him, you know what's interesting? Is that my kids, grandkids may live in China. I mean, they may go to school and get a job that lands them in China. We didn't think that way when I grew up. You were going to get a job at the post office, right? We didn't think that way when I was growing up. So we have to really prepare our young people, and I don't want to say this blanketly, but I think we kind of took our eye off the young people in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and we left them to their own efforts. We left them on their own. Parents, divorce rates soar, single motherhood, moms had to go work, weren't at home. So we kind of left our kids to their own devices for the past 2-3 decades. And our communities are, as a result of it, we see the consequence now. You and I had the conversation about how you make the policy today, but you don't necessarily see the consequence of the policy immediately. But we see the consequence of all those things now. And I want to clarify, single mother to me does not automatically say our kids will be failures. And I want to make sure that's on the record, because that's something I don't not believe that. I believe the quality of the household determines whatever that makeup is in the household. 2-parent families have kids who struggle just like single moms have kids who struggle. But I think we've taken our eye off the prize as from a federal level, as we look to make cuts to fund wars and all these things. The easiest place to cut are in areas that impact our kids. We cut after school program. We cut all those things that our kids really benefit from. And I think unless we really, really focus on making sure they're prepared to be the next generation of leaders in our communities, this will continue. And it'll become more pervasive. It's not just communities like East Cleveland, because our skins are dark, that will suffer. We're starting to see across, public schools all over, not just in urban communities, are struggling, because of funding cuts. And when you don't have, your dad is not the CEO of the Fortune 500 company who can make $1 million donation to the school, then you're going to suffer from that. So I think we really have to keep our eye on the prize of our young people. And I want to put this on record. Mildred Brewer passed away last week. She was, I'm just touched by this lady. She was a councilwoman in our community that we really didn't value her. But she leaves me to remember that if we do not take care of the young people of this community, anything else we do doesn't matter, because the impact will never reach its optimum ability, because we will always be dealing with kids who struggle, and those kids ultimately grow up into adults who struggle, who have to live somewhere, and they will live here, if they don't find their way. And she reminds me that love of family is by far the most important thing we do. We have to love our kids as parents and aunts and whoever we are. And then we have to love our neighbors' kids. I mean, I love that. I love that I've taken the time to not only make sure my kids are cool, but that your kids are cool and the kids next door. Because ultimately, they're going to meet up one day. So.
Tell me about the major issues that need to be addressed in order to better your neighborhood, community, and the city.
Your husband just said to me that we are a collective of families. Our neighborhood is a collective of families. What if every family did their best? Right? One of the this isn't going to be played for 20 years, right? Okay. In East Cleveland right now, we have this major grass cutting problem because we have so many abandoned properties. And so one of my jobs in the mayor's office is, I answer the phone all the time. And people call up about the grass. Now, you can go back into the history of municipal budgets. There is no line item for grass cutting. Never has been. And as you know, in a society or in the community that we live in where finances are an issue, it's going to be kind of hard for us to create the grass cutting line item. We try to do the best we can, but to be honest, we don't have the resources or the finances to manage the abandoned properties that we have where our people have walked off from these houses. It's not like the government owned these houses and then did something and now we don't take care of them. These houses belonged to people. Well, these people are no longer there. So we get these calls all the time about grass. What if every neighbor just cut the grass next door? What if each neighbor just took it upon themselves to say to their kids, you're going to pick a lot and you're going to take care of it. You're going to cut the grass and you're going to keep the trash off of it. I mean, if we had a community of people who could think bigger than themselves, wow, right? To me, that's mind-boggling. I get out when people call, they're like, this grass. I'm like, wow. I want to say, but I can't. You have any kids living on your street? You guys have a street club that maybe could purchase a lawnmower? Could maybe you teach the kids about landscaping and lawn care? Because guess what? No matter what, there'll always be a need for landscapers. Wow. Could you imagine? We have this one lady, I've never met her, don't know who she is, but she's my shero. She lives next door to an abandoned property. She cuts the grass, she sweeps the porch off, and she has beautiful potted plants and flowers on the porch next door to her. Wow. Never met the lady. She's never called City Hall and complained about the yard next door to her. She went out. She doesn't own the property next door. But when you ride next door to her, when you ride down her street and you look at her house and the house next door, they look nice. She doesn't get anything from the city for doing that. And I'm sure it may cost her a few pennies out of her pocket. But not even that much, because I'm sure if you went to like some of these businesses around here and say, hey, I just, give me $2 worth of flower seed or something. But anyway, that's what I would hope for this community, that we had a community of people that understood that they're a part of all this and that they can help make it better, as opposed to just calling up government asking them what you gonna do about it. Because we don't have the capacity. I wish our politicians would say that, just come out with the real deal honesty. We can't do it. Now what? But we don't get that.
Okay. What would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better?
Oh, I think I participate. Like I said, I work with the kids in the community. I get to work in government. I think going back to each household being accountable, how I would be accountable, I think long ago I made the decision to contribute to this community by contributing good citizens. I make sure that the Kyle girls are good citizens for this community. So that's my first and most important contribution, is that I make sure the kids that come out of this house are good citizens.
Your 3 daughters.
My 3 daughters. I think that's the first thing I do. Then secondly, I'm involved, and even prior to having a job that paid me, I was involved in the community. I got involved by volunteering. I mean, I think that's one real way that we make a difference, is when we give of ourselves. And sure, I volunteered lots of hours, but if you volunteer 1 hour, it makes a difference, because, I mean, we do not have the financial resources for everything in the community. But if we share what we have, if we share our gifts and talents, then within our borders, we'll have a better community.
Right. Yeah, something you mentioned, can you explain the youth organization you work with?
I get to participate with the Police Activities League. And I have to tell you, what our police do in this community that they don't even get half the credit for is give of themselves for the kids. I have 5, let me count them. There's Brown, Thompson, Yaya, Shanika, Kissa, Chief Spots, McDonald. I have 7 police officers who volunteer with the PAL, Police Activities League, in our mentoring program. Now, we have our police who help with the sports programs, but I don't know the numbers. But just for the mentoring program, I have 7 officers who don't get paid and give of their time to come and work with the youth of the community. And the mentoring, which is really just a powerful initiative, is to work with kids outside of their home to help them understand the community they live in. We meet with them once a week, and where we just, first of all, it parallels to what you're working on, Voices in Action. We're teaching them to develop their voice. We're teaching them how to articulate the concerns they have in a way that can get them some results. We're teaching them how to articulate the issues they don't understand so that we can help them understand them. Not to say that we can change them or solve the problem, but we can help them understand what the problem is, and then in a sense empower them if there's any way for it to be changed, that they would be the ones that change it. Help them to understand the value of education. We're that secondary voice of people that they get to meet to say, school is important, it's paramount, you've got to have it. It's no joke about it. So I work with this organization. We've taken our kids camping, we've taken them outside of the borders of this community so that they further understand the world beyond. Getting them to, and when you hear a child say to you, or a young person say to you, we call them youth leaders, Miss Kyle, I'm going to work harder in school. Miss Kyle, I didn't get in trouble this week, because they're hearing what we're saying. But they're also, what we really like is that they hear what their peers say. We use a lot of peer-to-peer discussion. We put an issue on the floor and we let the peers talk about it, so that we had one discussion I remember about homework. When it was one of our young kids who said, "You're not doing your homework," that's you being stupid, right? Where they can say it on that level too, because grown people tell kids to do stuff all the time and kids just whatever. But when they hear their peers say, "You're stupid for not doing your homework," it's so much more impactful. So I like that we have this cohort of kids that we're working with. I was sharing with you, I just took them to the park and they're like, "What we gonna do, Miss Kyle?" You're gonna do nothing. You're gonna go out and enjoy the fresh air. We to be honest, I had them go back to the park because a month ago we planted 15 trees in Forest Hill Park. That was their community service project. And they really got into it, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed being outdoors in a beautiful park. So we were really going back to check on the trees. They got an opportunity. People have been bothering them. They got mad about it.
Where did they plant them?
Along the pond, the ridgeway along the pond.
Oh, okay.
So the next time you're in the park, you'll see that those line of trees, East Cleveland Powell Youth Leaders planted those trees. So they are looking forward to a decade or so from now coming back and knowing that they put them there. So yeah, I love the PAL program. I love working with the young people. I love watching them. I love identifying the leaders because, you know, some people are meant to be leaders. Everybody leads their own life, so everybody's a leader in some regard. But you get to see people who you know one day will really be leading something more than themselves. I love seeing that happen, and I love kind of guiding their spirits and helping them to find the things that will make them the best leader that they can be. So that's cool.
So you mentioned that the Chief Spots, is also one of your 7 volunteers?
Our chief of police, who was born and raised in East Cleveland, I didn't get to say that. I get to go to work every day and on the highest administrative level for this city, work with Ralph Spots, who grew up in East Cleveland, went through the baseball programs of this community, came back and taught school in this community, then became a police officer who is now the chief of police for this community, who every day is concerned about the kids of this community. That's phenomenal. That's powerful. He wants the police to know the kids. He'll see a kid in the street kind of veering off, and he knows them by name. That's powerful. Where he can stop, knows that parent because they came up through the PAL or the East Cleveland Chiefs program.
Right.
You know, that's community, right? Our chief of staff, Colette Clinkscale, attended school here, worked for this community for 25 years, started as the purchasing agent, then went on to be director of water. Now she's the chief of staff. Loves this community. That East Cleveland is a very special place.
And just tell us your position.
I'm the mayor's assistant. I'm the phone answerer. I answer the phone.
That's your title, mayor's assistant. What's your title?
Executive assistant to the mayor. I'm just the phone answerer. That's what I say there. No, I actually get to be involved in the decisions that are made on behalf of this community. And most importantly, I'm involved in the decisions that are made on behalf of the young people of this community. That's where I put my most focus, is what are we doing for the kids of this community? What are we doing to make sure that they're ready to be adults?
The police activity league, is that male and female?
Male and female. Kids are ages 9 to 17 for any grant funding we have. But I never turn a kid away. I have a little 5-year-old who comes to PAL. Actually, my best story about my PAL program is we were having a discussion about the importance of the A, B, and C plan. Like, you know, you go around the room, what are you going to be? I'm going to be LeBron James. Okay, what are you going to be if you're not LeBron James, right? Making sure kids understand, okay, what happens if you're not LeBron? Okay, what happens if you're not that? And some of our older kids hadn't quite worked out their A, B, and C plan. Of course, they have time, but, you know, some kids are. And it was a little 6-year-old who said, you know, I'm going to be a hairstylist, and if I can't be a hairstylist, I'm going to be a nail tech, and if I can't be a nail tech, I'm going to be a massage person. I was like, had it all covered, right? You got to have plans.
And so, Powell, what is your position? I just want to be clear, what's your title with Powell?
I'm the actual program director for the mentoring and youth leadership program. So what I do in that is I'm always looking for mentors to work with the kids to come and be around the kids. And then I just, I organize the activities and events that take place within that, and whatever field trips, whatever we do under that, I kind of organize that along with our mentors and input from our young people. We ask them what it is they're interested in, and then we kind of plan around it. I had a young man tell me we took the group to COSI, the Science Center in Columbus, and I actually had one of the youth leaders say in the group, before I went to COSI, I didn't like science. I was getting D's in my class. Since we've been to COSI, I'm now a B student because I really like science and understand it a little more. Because I think he was able to see from a broad sense, okay, what the heck is science? Versus, the worksheet type of structure that we use in school and in education sometimes. Here's a book and here's a worksheet.
Now, was he a student at our middle school heritage?
He was a Chambers Elementary student. So he's on his way. Yeah, exactly. What science do they get? So, because he was able to go outside the classroom, right? To a place that said, oh, you want science? You want to know what science is? Here. And we gave him hours to just wander around. And one day he decided, oh, I do like science. Oh, I can do science. And now he's getting a B on his worksheets.
So, is there anything else you'd like to say, to people who see this tape now or in the future about your city, your relationship with the city, or anything related to what
I would just reiterate that our community is a special place. I pray for its sustainability. I pray that 20 years from now, that when we are playing these tapes back, East Cleveland, Ohio, still exists. Because we're actually at a point in time right now that if we do not all pull together and decide to row our boat in the same direction, perhaps in 20 years when these tapes are taken out of the archives, East Cleveland will just be the history of East Cleveland. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do I get to ever see it?
Yeah.